am a licensed professional counselor, and I work at the Anxiety Center of Houston. And so I actually use art, well, as an art therapist, I actually help people use art in order to process, trauma, current difficulties and challenges as far as difficulty adjusting, anxiety, depression, all those different things. And so, of course, like Casey said, there is a lot going on. And as she also said, as creatives, we have a special tool that we're already familiar with using, whatever your creativity is, that we're already familiar with using, even if we're not doing it on a conscious level, that creativity tends to help us process. I definitely do think it is a gift that God has given us, that it's not necessary that you are great at it, whatever that means, but just that you're open to allowing yourself to use whatever tools are at your disposal to help yourself process how you relate to the world and how you make sense of the world. So when we were kids, first thing we did before we formed clear words was we scribbled, and then we scribbled in circles, and then we actually made little things that kind of look like people. And all of that research has shown is how a child makes sense of the world around them. They actually create images that help them document how they're starting to understand, and it helps to integrate information. So that's my spiel. What I tend to find with adults is that, thankfully, you guys are creative, so you kind of dig into it already. They kind of walk away from that tool as a way to process. It becomes something that they have to be good at, and therefore they become self-conscious about it and don't want to engage in it. And also, just in general, what I find a lot of, and my colleagues find a lot of, is that people just have lost their sense of how to process themselves, how to be with themselves, how to accept themselves, how to be present is the biggest thing that I'm seeing. Most of the people that come in with depression or anxiety, it's a matter of them not taking time to just sit and ask themselves where they are, what do they need? And they become afraid, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, afraid to deal with feelings. The feelings themselves become the hardest thing for a person to imagine actually dealing with or being with, not even the situation itself. I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be whatever it is. I don't want to be angry. And so one of the most important things that I think that's been helpful for people is to learn to just be, and that we are given all of our feelings for a reason. The difference is that the feelings are not meant to be our conductors. You've probably heard that before. They're not meant to drive the bus for us. They're meant to be passengers. They can be there if we let them, but they're just not meant to drive, but they're also not something that we need to fight. The feeling is not the enemy. The feeling is an indicator of something that's either wrong or that needs to be attended to. And so if one of the things that we can do first is to change our relationship with feelings and not make them the thing that you spend all of your energy trying to get rid of, because you already have the thing and you have a feeling that tells you that something is wrong. So you already have the thing that you're anxious about, if it's anxiety. And then you become anxious about being anxious. I hate being anxious. I need to get rid of anxiety, but I'm already anxious about what's going on in the world. And then I'm going to struggle against the anxiety. And so now you have a double struggle, rather than just having the anxiety and allowing yourself to be compassionate towards yourself while you have whatever it is that you have. And especially right now with everything that's going on, the myriad of different challenges and struggles, like Casey said, a lot of people are just saying, I'm tired. And even the person who tended to themselves the most would probably still be tired right now, because that's just what we're dealing with. So, what are some healthy ways to kind of process those feelings? One, like I said, is acceptance. Stop fighting them. Stop fighting them. Stop trying to avoid and ignore them. So the other side of fighting them and, I just don't want to feel this is, I don't feel that. I don't have that. And so we don't even realize it, but it takes just as much or even more energy to try to avoid something that is than it does to just have it and decide how to be with it in a healthy way and decide to listen to what it's there to tell you. And so that's one of the really important things to also do. It's like So the first step is really a change in the mindset. And then, so another part is like to actually allow yourself to be with yourself in a healthy way. So we don't want to fall into the emotion and just jump into the pool of it and swim to the bottom and sit there and drown in it, definitely. So that's not healthy either, because then what's happening is that there's still life happening and you're not functioning anymore because you just want to be in your feelings. As the popular popular phrase goes, now I'm just in my feelings. And everything that you do, that's when you're conducting, allowing your feelings to conduct. Everything you do is reactionary. I'm reacting to my anxiety. So I'm saying things that I don't mean to say. I'm reacting to my anger. And so I'm saying things or doing things that I don't mean to do or that I wouldn't value to. A lot of times when we are reactionary, we end up being in opposition to what's really important to us. And so the idea is to let the feelings be there with you while you also decide what's important to you for this moment. You know, what is important. And so one of the key ways to kind of work through this is to allow yourself to be mindful. And so I think mindfulness is that thing that you hear so much these days. And a lot of people have a different idea about it, especially like in the church. I hear sometimes where, and there are applications that are not biblical, but I hear, oh, mindfulness, I just pray about it. And that's all I got to do is, I pray about it and then that's it. I don't need to sit there and, engage chakras or whatever that is, which I don't advocate for that either. Mindfulness just simply means that you're allowing yourself to be present. It's not a relaxation tool. Relaxation might come, but what it actually is you allowing yourself to be present, to engage with yourself with wherever you are, and to accept wherever you are without judgment and with compassion. And so a lot of times if you think about when you're anxious, I know I can do it sometimes, when you're anxious, you go, oh, why is this coming up again? Oh, how could I, the Bible says, be anxious for nothing. So now I'm sinning. So, and so I'm already anxious and now I'm like, oh my God, judging myself so much for having this feeling. And so mindfulness says, I'm going to sit with this, whatever this is, and I'm just going to check in and help myself understand where I am and what I'm feeling, both in my physical body and in my mind and my heart. I'm just going to let it be what it is without judgment. A helpful way to think about that is to think about what you would tell your best friend or how you would be with your best friend if they were experiencing something really challenging. You would hopefully be with them with a sense of compassion. If they came up to you and said, I'm having a really hard time, yada, 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 you wouldn't say, stop that. You always come to me saying all that stuff and I don't have time for that. But we have such ugly language towards ourselves that we would never say to other people. So mindfulness definitely involves allowing yourself to just be compassionate, first of all. That what compassion doesn't mean is enabling. It doesn't mean you get to, oh, it's okay, you're perfectly right. Everything that you're thinking is perfectly fine. You need to continue to do that. That's not what that means. It just means that you're accepting that this is where you are and you're going to start from there without judgment. Because when you think about a friend, if you were like the friend I was just telling you about, if you were to express that you're having a difficult time and then you told that friend that information and they responded to you like that, how willing would you be to go further, to actually ask them advice or be with them and allow them to speak into your life? Or how would you respond? Would you be defensive or would you be willing to let them talk with you? Would you trust them even? I'm going to actually ask that question. Anybody? I picked Megan.
Sorry, the question was, this the question?
Yeah, if you were to have a challenging time or challenging anxiety that you were experiencing, you were to talk to a friend about it and they were to say, oh, stop feeling that. You don't have time to feel that. That's dumb. How willing would you be to actually continue to engage with that person?
Nope. I mean, I've had this myself. I was raised in an environment where negative emotions were not welcome. We were not allowed to talk about them. And I learned from an early age just to keep them to myself, which I know now is not healthy. And sure, my family, they know that that was not the best way to handle the situation.
Right.
So yeah, they know that now. They shouldn't have done that. And so
yeah.
I wouldn't be.
Exactly.
Mm-mm.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, and that's what we have that same relationship with ourselves, and it can cause ourselves to turn inward from ourselves, and that's where avoidance comes in, and that's where you add sorrow and sadness on top of the other challenging emotions you're already feeling. Now I'm bad about feeling these things, and so mindfulness, practically, what that would actually look like is maybe taking some time at the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day when you have a break, and you just have that, like that 5-hour energy commercial goes, that little lull in your day, or at the end of the day when you're wanting to process and kind of wrap up what's happened and check in with yourself. It's taking a moment to just breathe, maybe even close your eyes, scan your body, and just notice physically where you start to feel tension, where you feel any kind of heaviness, and becoming aware of it and talking to yourself like, I'm allowed, or this is where I am. This is just where this is what I have. It's not changing right now at this moment. This is just what I have. And just allow yourself to go through that. But also asking yourself, what are some of the events of the day? What are some of the things that I'm carrying? And letting yourself breathe as you are with yourself in an accepting and a compassionate, a non-judgmental way. So that's just a really practical way to just check in with yourself. One of the, if you are experiencing anxiety, one of the really helpful ways to tend to your physical body is to breathe in. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but if you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and make sure that your out breath is longer than your in breath. So it'll be like breathing in for 4 seconds and then breathing out for like 7. That actually physically decreases your heart rate. And so if you're starting to feel anxious, it's usually because you thought something that has then led to a feeling in your body. And so what you do is you start with the feeling in your body and reduce that. And then you can engage that part of your mind that's actually able to process in a healthy way. Because when you're anxious, all of your attention, that's that fight or flight response, and you're laser focused on something. And if you've noticed, if whenever you get anxious, you're not really able to process very clearly. So it's important to calm your body down so that your mind will get back into a space where that prefrontal cortex is in that space where you can actually process your thoughts in a healthy way and work through whatever the anxiety is. I'm going really out of order. And so another way, as we were talking about before, as creatives, is to utilize our creativity. And so you can do that, like Casey and I were talking about before this meeting, is like everybody has their own form of creativity. Baking, as we know, is one. Art, drawing, photography, whatever it is that you use and what you're interested in, open to using in order to explore the world around you and how you connect with the world around you can be a really helpful tool. And so that can be a part of your mindfulness routine. Anytime you're able to just focus on one thing for a period of time, you're being mindful. Whenever you allow yourself to be in the present, that means that you're engaging your senses. Then you're allowing yourself to be mindful. So what do we do when we're engaging in art? We're using our physical bodies, we're using the sense of touch, we're using the sense of sound, we're using all these things. And it's hard for our mind to be 2 different places at once. It's hard for our mind to be in the future or in the past and in the present. And so what you're doing is creating a atmosphere for yourself to allow yourself to just be present. And so journaling can be a really great way to do that. Sometimes people have difficulty coming up with where to start with journaling, whatever way that they journal. And so basically we'll talk about it later, but we do have some ideas for some prompts that may be a helpful way for you guys to get started with this practice. And so she'll tell you more about that. But like we were talking about before, even in processing through journaling, just letting yourself be wherever you are. So if you start to write or you start to create something and you're like, ooh, I don't really like that. See if you will allow yourself to continuously practice acceptance, because it's really hard to process where you are and to find out what you need if you won't tell yourself the truth. And so you have to tell yourself the truth about where you are. And that takes accepting it enough to let it come out in whatever way, in a healthy way, but whatever way it comes out of you. Okay. So that's kind of like those are a couple of ways that you can just process in general on a regular basis. Now, I do realize that sometimes, whether it's during all of this stuff or beforehand or after all of this is done, that anxiety is just a part of some of our lives in some way or shape or form. We're going to experience it in some way. And sometimes it is overwhelming. And so one of the things that is helpful to manage that right away, so like, again, I was saying, you can get back into your higher brain so you can think better, is to ground yourself using your senses like we talked about. So if you ever find yourself becoming really overwhelmed, besides taking the deep breaths that we're talking about, also allowing yourself to engage your senses by asking yourself, what are 3 things that I can hear? What are 3 things that I can smell? What are 3 things that I can see that I wasn't paying attention to before? What are 3 things that I touch physically, that I feel? And kind of describe those things to yourself. As an example, usually when I do this exercise in the room with clients, and they're really anxious, and I say, tell me 5 things that you can hear. And it's quiet in quotes, because it generally, when you're not paying attention, there's not a lot of noise. But the more you listen, the more you hear. And the more they listen, they say, oh, I hear the air conditioning. It's not as quiet as I thought. Oh, I hear people talking outside of the room. The more they listen, the more that they bring themselves into the present space. And so the more that you bring yourself in the present space, the less you're in the future, and the less you're in the past, the less you're in your anxiety. And so that's a really helpful tool that people can use. It kind of helps them to come out of panic attacks, all of those types of things, because they're not in the space that's creating the habit. And I think the other thing that I just wanted to mention was I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the different types of rest. Casey kind of hinted at it before, like, I'm just tired in all of these different places. And I think that sometimes what we don't really realize is that there are different kinds of tired, that there's not just the physical tired. And sometimes when we try to, the way that we try to bandage or relieve tiredness is always, I just need more sleep. I just need a nap. While that may be helpful to some extent, if you are spiritually tired, then a nap may seem to meet the need initially. But have you ever been tired and then you wake up and you're still tired? I know I have. And so that tells me that I haven't applied the right kind of rest. I haven't really checked in on the kind of rest that I actually need. And there are different kinds. And so just maybe even naming them as possibilities may be helpful for you to kind of assess what you really need. And so there's, of course, the physical tiredness that typically takes a nap, or if you've been working out and then you just, have to sit down for a while, whatever that is. And there's just mental rest. That's the ability to quiet the cerebral chatter and focus on things that really matter. And so when there's so much stuff that's happening and so many different things, information that you're taking in. I've been at work all day and I've had all this stuff coming at me. I'm just really tired. And that might be helpful, but it doesn't address the actual need. And that's the thing about mindfulness and all of this and paying attention to yourself, is to really hone in on what the problem is so you can actually address the real need and give yourself what you actually need. And so, like I said, the spiritual rest also is the capacity to experience God and everything and recline in his knowledge. And so we have our Sabbaths, right? And I know that sometimes I'm guilty too, that we don't really take it as seriously as we need to, but Sabbath rest is really important in moments throughout the day, in a day itself, but allowing yourself to just really truly rest, experience God's sustaining rest in your life, And so a nap's not going to cure that. And nap's not going to give you what you need there. There's emotional rest. There's a lot going on in society. And we can get really highly angry. We can get highly anxious. We can get highly sad. We can get all of these feelings, right? And the more that we focus on those different sources of that, the more that we stay in that space. Sometimes I'm hearing this, some people feel like guilty for not continuously keeping this thing that's so important, that doesn't make it less important, in front of us, right? I need to always be concentrating on it. I need to always be doing something with this. But you are not a machine. You were actually made to pull away and get perspective and recognize that there's more going on in the world that in your world that's important. Especially when we're talking about social unrest and inequality and all of those things that are so important for us to fight for. Sometimes we forget why it's so important to fight for those things, that there are people in our lives that matter to us that we want to protect and keep safe. If it's the COVID pandemic and I need to know what's going on with COVID because my family might be in danger, but remember your family. That is the reason why you got anxious in the first place, because you care about your family. Go and spend time with your family, right? Remember what you're doing and give yourself some emotional rest from the trouble and engage in the things that are valuable to you. There's social rest. And I know y'all know what that looks like because there's so much social media everywhere. And there's people, even if we're, not really always in front of each other. And introverts know this, and even extroverts, we all need rest socially at some point in time. It's just we need it in different, to a different extent. And so letting yourself know when you've had too much of people, when you've had too much interaction, even positive interactions with people can still be tiring. And so allowing yourself to recognize that without judgment. Oh, what kind of person am I? I love my friends. How could I not want to spend time with my friends? Okay. It has nothing to do with how much you love your friends. It's about what your body and your mind and your spirit needs. And even Jesus, if we need to bring Jesus, we always need to bring Jesus into it. But if we need to reference Jesus, even Jesus spent time away. And he loved people more than all of us love people. And he knew the necessity of it so that we can come back to people in a way that's fruitful and valuable and healthy and life-giving to both them and us. And so some of these overlap as well, but then there's sensory rest. Just I'm a person that gets overwhelmed by sensory information a lot. If stuff is too loud all the time, if there's a lot of noise and chatter, and there's a lot of lights and colors and movement, if we have too much of that for an extended period of time, that can cause us to get tired. And so we need to take a break from taking in a lot of sensory information. You might need to shut your eyes, go and sit in a quiet, dark room or a quiet room for a while and just allow yourself to get that type of rest. And so there's also more like creative rejuvenation, but creative rest. And so that just means that you go, and it doesn't have to be stuff that you create, it can be, but that could just be going out and experiencing creation, being in nature, allowing beauty and the arts and different things to inspire you and to refresh your soul. And so those are some of the different areas of rest that I think are really important for us to recognize so that we can be more specific in the way that we offer ourselves what we need. So, yeah.